Some people might not know this, but NieR Automata is one of my most beloved games in history. A game that talks about existentialism, right and wrong, despair, and hope, all mixed in together with amazing dialogue, strong as hell story, memorable characters, and a gameplay scheme that is nothing short of sublime. After finishing Automata, I found out that the game was actually a sequel to another game that I've never heard about before, called NieR, which itself was a spin-off slash sequel of the most insane ending in an RPG called Drakengard. And even more insane is the fact that NieR actually has two versions. The first version came as NieR Gestalt in 2010, renamed to just NieR in the West, and a couple of years later, Japan got a newer version of the game called NieR Replicant, which told the same story with some alterations. Gestalt tells the story of a father doing what he can to save his daughter Jonah from a deadly disease in a world sunken into despair. This father, aptly dubbed Father NieR, goes on a journey with unlikely companions with twists and turns that would definitely get your whole attention throughout the game time. While Replicant replaces his father for a brother instead, but the story is essentially the same. And the subject of this video is the remake, aptly titled NieR Replicant version which is essentially an enhanced port of the 2012 release telling the story of Brother NieR. The game's story and writing is definitely the strongest points of this game, relying on dialogue and character interactions to develop every character you meet. This is more apparent in characters like Emil that hold deep dark secrets within their character arcs, or NPCs like the Redback couple. Replicant narrates the struggles of a world that has essentially no hope, especially if we talk about the second half of the game. In this half is where most of the magic happens when it comes to storytelling. Replicant relies on multiple playthroughs where you carry over your character progression, weapons, money, and the items you've gathered. And in these multiple playthroughs is where we get a glimpse of what is to me one of the strongest weapons in Replicant's storytelling: perspective. A narrative tool that games like Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy, and many other franchises have utilized to add complexity and depth to their stories. In this game, by the time you get to the third playthrough, you see every character, encounter, and enemy in a whole different light. You start questioning your actions and feel empathy for some of the characters. During your first playthrough, you fight enemies, especially bosses, like you would in any other game. You get to the end of the game and you're done with it. But the second time around, these bosses you've already fought now have dialogue, and also get expository cutscenes that deepen their character. And this is not something that Replicant pulls out of nowhere just to make you feel bad. This is because of Kaine. Kaine is one of the four main protagonists of the game, and all playthroughs except the first one have a lot of moments where the sole focus of the story is on her. And it's because she is possessed by a shade, the monsters that you fought from the very beginning. And after the first playthrough, you find out that after all that time, she has been able to understand everything the enemies have been trying to say. Perspective is something that Replicant does the best, especially after playing through the newest route added to this version of the game. Too bad its storytelling is hampered by the game itself at times. NieR is an open-world action RPG where you have to travel between towns and points of interest on foot while fighting enemies and mobs you find along the way. This adds a lot of tedium to the game from the get-go. Even if you get faster means of movement, in this case, riding a bull after completing a side quest early on in the story, you spend at least the first half of the game on foot before you get a somewhat limited fast travel function during the second half of the game. And why would you run around so much in the game, you may ask? Well, because of side quests. Side quests that are very important for you to complete because they might give you a weapon or may upgrade a specific skill for you to get a weapon later by completing a different quest. Now listen, I don't hate side quests. I'm all down to side quests that give you mundane rewards or interactions that develop the game world. Hell, there are some of the best side quests in this game that I've seen in quite a while. But it doesn't take away the fact that some side quests are so fucking boring that it doesn't even make sense. fishing, gathering and breeding flowers? Who the hell asked for this? What makes it worse is that some of these quests are all fucking random, making you do the same shit multiple times. There are 8 different fishing side quests that are paint melting boring, and you need to do them in specific sites to get the specific fish they ask you for, and other quests that require specific items dropped from defeated enemies, where the drop rate is at least like 20%, meaning you're going to the same site fighting the same enemies multiple times until you get the item you need. Would you believe me if I told you that I was resetting my computer clock and my game for over an hour in order to breed the specific flower for a quest? Because I did. And I did all this in order to unlock more side quests for the promise of a new weapon. And you might be wondering, why do I care about collecting every weapon in the game? Well, because you need every weapon in the game to see the true ending. Endings C, D, and E are all locked down until you find every weapon in the game. But also, remember when I said the game is divided into halves? Well, there's a 5-year timescape in-game, and there are some weapons that may not be available to you after you skip. And why is that? Because you can't go back. There's a gigantic middle finger if you're not careful enough to look for every weapon available in the first half, because after you finish the game once, you're thrown back into a specific moment in the second half of the game. It's definitely awful from the devs to lock out features due to recklessness. But in all fairness, the 9 weapons you should have before the skip are easily attainable in the first half. You just need to look for boxes in specific zones in the game and sell some garbage or crops to get some funds in order to buy them. I know this last part went into rant territory, but if you take the time to go through the rough patches of the game, you're treated to one of the best stories I've ever seen in gaming. All characters are so well written and developed, the story is dark and depressing, but it also shows a brighter side of life. What's even better is that the game makes sense by the end of it, and it's able to clarify many things that were alluded to in Automata, which I found really neat. But I failed to tell you about the gameplay itself, so let me tell you that it's really good. It's a hack and slash with RPG elements and a dash of bullet hell here and there. Developer Toy Logic wanted to update the gameplay of the original NieR so it would resemble Automata's gameplay. So they took some notes from Platinum's combat system from Automata, and boom, you've got a pretty solid game. Sure, it's not as amazing and as well thought out as Automata, but it gets the job done. Instead of a pod, you're accompanied by Grimoire Vice, a flying book that can cast different spells with varying effects, like Gluttony that can absorb nearby bullets and shoot them back at enemies, and gigantic hands that slam people to the ground, plus many more. Vice is one of the protagonists of the game. His story is quite intricate and it's definitely one of the highlights of this whole game, all the way till the end. Combat is exciting and thoughtful, especially when it comes to dodging windows and counters you can do by blocking an enemy's attack at the right moment. This encourages fighting and encounters against enemies. And during the second half of the game you have access to more weapons, two-handed swords and spears. Do you want AoE damage? Grab spears. Do you want single target damage? Grab swords. Do you want to destroy everything in your path? Grab two-handed swords. It's just that great. Now, to conclude this video, I have to say that overall, NieR Replicant is a very good game and had me very happy. Although not as good as Automata, having some filler things that I don't necessarily like, it's still a very good game that has a really good narrative. One that I recommend to anyone willing to experience a damn good story with some minor deviations now and again. But if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of my content, consider subscribing. There's a new series in this channel called Voice Chat that you can see every week on this channel. So, if you like gaming news and stuff of the sort, be sure to check us out. Until next time, bye bye.